Hi, my name is Benedict for Higher Hertz. This video we're looking at Kilohearts Phase Plant. One needs to be very careful how one says phase plant, lest one end up suggesting face plant. It appears though with the name Kilohearts, which is a play on words, that they probably have an impressively nerdy desire to have plays on words. So, cool. If I appear to get it wrong, I'm probably getting it right as well. And besides, I'm probably wearing the appropriately nerdy shirt with holes and everything. I was actually going to be doing this tomorrow morning, but I've got a client come on, so they figured, well, might as well move it up to Sunday afternoon, seeing the neighbour is playing some kind of generic pop music incredibly loudly. Hopefully you can't hear it, but if you can, that's what's happening. Phase Plant. Phase Plant has been out for a while now. It has collected itself some awards over the years, and it is a little bit of a unique proposition. I actually did a massive review and then had a play around making certain types of sounds for this when it first came out. I found, oddly enough, despite its power and uniqueness as an instrument, that it didn't get much general chatter. It seemed like a certain type of musician in a certain genre picked it and they were using it, and it seemed to sort of fall off the radar for everybody else. Either people have it and are so busy using it and keeping it a secret, or for some reason it just didn't get across. I don't really get why. The possible reason is that it is a bit of a sound designer's instrument. When we open it up, as you'll see, it opens up empty, blank, nothing plays. Unusual in this market where everything's very preset driven. There are a lot of presets in here, and we'll walk through some of those. Kilohearts have been around for some time. They have several products, and a lot of that revolves around building little modules that can be put together. So they've got Snapin, which you can download for free with a little grab bag of basic tools, chorus, delay, limiter, what have you. None of which are super exciting on their own, but they do their job. And they do their job generally pretty well, without great complaint for what they are. And they've built that sort of over time. They do have some more specialist devices, bigger EQs and Faturator and things like that. But it's that approach, which is small bits, which used together make a bigger something, which actually define how Phase Plant works. In terms of looking at the product and how to buy it, that causes some confusion, and last time I even got some negativity, not for me to have to solve, but I thought it was inappropriate negativity because Phase Plant gives you different ways to buy and to buy at different amounts. I know that's a little bit modern, but the thing is, I think it's fair. If you want the basic synthesizer engine, which again just comes with some basic effects and what have you, then 169 will get you there. And personally, that's probably the way that I would be going, because if I had to pay the full price for the absolutely everything, including the neighbour's kitchen sink, I'd probably never buy in, because I'd be thinking all those things I'm never going to use. Bit crushers, 48 different bit crushers, no, I made that up. Not really a thing I'm going to use. So the fact that they've allowed us to kind of pick and choose to some extent how we want to buy in, I actually think is very fair. If you look at the synthesis engine and realise what can be done with it, then I think it's a pretty good value proposition. If you then want to go down the road of all those little extra Snapin plugins, which I believe you can use elsewhere in the VST world, then bully for you, then I think that's actually a really good way to go, and it's probably pretty fairly priced if you want those things. But you don't have to have those things to actually get full use out of the synth. If I were getting it, it'd be living in my Reason environment, and I'd be using all my existing effects that I know and love. Yes, I miss out on the opportunity to use them in polyphonic mode, but I tend not to work that way. But I will show you how it works, because in its own way, it is actually really rather cool. Now, I actually got, and I'm very impressed with this, because when I went to do this review, I got asked, oh, can you do this synth? Can you do phase plant? It's like, yeah, all for it. And it's like, I've used my trial, and my trial, I couldn't go again. So I thought, look, let's see. I didn't expect a lot of joy out of this, but I have had some engagement with some Kilohearts people before and found them very personable. So I just fired off an email saying, here's the situation. I reviewed your toy way back when, a couple of years ago. I've been asked to do it again. Would be delighted to, but roadblock. As you see from looking at the times and dates, they came back very quickly and very positively and in a very pleasing personal manner. It wasn't just a, here, let me write half a sentence, and there's a personal response here. So I'm really happy with that, and I'm happy to say, because a lot of companies are not great with customer service. You buy and then you can feel like an impediment, and it doesn't seem to be that way with Kilohearts. So if that's the way they're going, great. They did ask me to download all the extra Snapin plugs and the multipass, and do all of that as part of the review. Sorry, fellow who I'm not going to name, because I don't think it's fair to put your name on this, even though you did a really good job, and I would be happy to commend you in that way. So Kilohearts, if you want to know who it is, find that email, pat him on the back, buy him a champagne or something. For the purpose of this review, I'm actually going to keep it just really on the basic $169 instrument, because it's such an enormous instrument to try to pull in everything it can do. I think it would make the review somewhat pointless. So appreciate the offer, good suggestion, probably not going to happen here. If we get enough interest, then maybe we'll have another go. I may have to bother you again for a reset, but it's a good offer, and really particularly just want to point out how well the company behaved to this when they could have just gone, heh, and ignored me. Let's close all of thems down. Looking at the instrument. Just the housekeeping first. Everything is getting a little bit of reverb, with the exception of the presets that we will look at, just because it makes life a little bit easier and I don't have access to their reverb, but there's not a lot. Phase plant itself. When we open up, as I said, nothing. That is unusual in the market. I actually think that's a pretty good thing. Personally, I would probably rather that there was one oscillator in so I get some sound, but I admire the hardcoredness of this, because if you have one oscillator in, then that's probably the oscillator you're going to start using, and it's maybe not the oscillator that you really should have started using if you were listening to the song gods, and they might have said, use the wavetable, rather than the analog, which probably would have defaulted. Also, look at this. Boys and girls, there is a new button right up the top. So if you have something here and you press new, gone. You get to start with a completely blank slate. I know the blank slate will frighten some people, and that is super, super sad. You do need to understand the architecture and how this works, but it is pretty visual at the same time, in the sense that what is below generally is affected by what comes above and goes into what goes below. It's pretty simple, but a new button. Yes! We will run through some presets. There are quite a lot of presets, don't know how many. I've extracted some and put them into a favorite, so you can see, but it doesn't seem to be a massive preset synth. Also, you will find that presets are more like a classic synth, in the sense that they're not all super organized and giving you something of everything. So while I looked at Purity last time, which aims to try and give you something of everything, this will not cover that at all. It's a synthesist's synth in that sense. Let's have a look at some of these that I shortlisted. That's pretty impressive. Adds extra reverb. Sounds good. Something that's also very cool about this instrument is that if a preset has used a snap-in that I don't have it taken out. So it's not like I get the patch gutted and wonder why it sounds, well, not very good. They're there. The only thing is, I can't edit them. They just put a little thing over, locking me out so that I can delete it or turn it on and off, but that's it. But I get to use the preset as made. That's clever marketing, but also kind of a positive thing for them. As you see, a lot of things can be moved, minimized, opened, closed, what have you. Like we've got groups here. We can open and close our groups. So if you're feeling like, oh, I'm a bit overloaded with stuff, then you can folderize, open and close things. Now, while perfectly capable of doing very nice rompler style pads and what have you, you will find a lot of the presets are on the paint strippery side. Nature of the beast, and as I said, nature of the people who've been attracted to the instrument. Is capable of doing delicate and pretty sounds. This is very typical of the phase plant sound as it is perceived from a lot of the users, or at least from the outside. Cool. Let's change macro 1. I'd like to see a lot more of this sort of stuff done within the phase plant environment, because it's got to be a lot more capable of beautiful sounds like this than just paint strippery sort of things. This being very typical. Look at nice. Sound-wise, it is prone to being digital, but for the moment I'm going to say that could well have a lot to do with the effects. I've spoken about this before. They're nice effects, but digital effects are when they're simple effects, are prone to making the most analog of sounds, like the Andromeda, unanalogued as soon as you put in the digital delay. So it's nice. doesn't sound remotely like a Vox Humana, but it is cool. And I think there's a huge scope for having interesting sounds out there like this. Oh, yes. Just think it sounds great. And this impresses me. It's such an interesting sounding kick. A kick was a sound that I set out to make. I got some pretty nasty responses, and honestly that put me off Phase Plant, that I got some from users in the community. Like somebody said, oh, can you show how to do this thing? And so I set out and I spent a huge amount of time showing the pathway there, if not exactly how to do exactly that thing. And, well, to be honest, I got a bollocking and told off for being stupid and useless, which, not the fault of Kilohearts at all, but it really kind of put me off the instrument to have that. But this is really impressive. It's a great sounding instrument built up of a huge number of layers and a huge amount of attention to detail. So, Rob, I don't know whether I know you, but this is impressive, really impressive. And plucks, yes. People will be like, will it do plucks? Of course it'll do plucks. It's a nice sound. There are a few sounds that claim to be analog, and I'm just sort of thinking, oh, don't know what kind of analogs you've been using, but and that's it. That's a run through of sounds that we've got there. I will run through a good and bad. What's good? What's good is that it's a real sound designer's paradise in many ways. It does sound good. Sometimes I feel like the sound is kind of constrained by something. I'm not sure what that is. It sometimes feels like the whole instrument is stuck with a certain sound. Not unusual for an instrument, and often that's the nature of the thing. But I'm also going to say that could be just a case of needing to take time to work outside of that little box that one can easily put themselves into. Price, I think, is fair. It's not amazing, but I think it's very fair for what you can do. So I think it's, if you are the right person for the instrument, a really, really impressive take on the modern Uber synth that can kind of do a bit of everything at once. The modularity, the put-togetherness is, I think, really, really impressive. Whether you like it or not, I think is irrelevant in that sense. The graphic user design experience is really impressive. Even if you think it fails, it's really impressive. The bads, well, having dealt with some of the users, but having dealt with the company, I see that as a real positive. We, again, should not blame the users or blame the company or the product on the users, but it does hurt. The bads, it is not the most CPU efficient thing. Now, maybe that's also within the reason environment. Maybe if I was in a different environment, it would behave differently. But there are some patches where even 16 voices has been pinning my system. I remember that last time. That was a whole different computer, not as powerful as this one. So maybe it's a little on the thirsty side, but at the same time, it's doing things that other synths don't really do. So it's kind of inevitable. Like he's Diva, renowned for being, but also renowned for having a depth of doohickery in its sound. And that's beyond the average. So it's a negative in that you have to be aware of it, but is it really a you shouldn't buy because this sucks? I don't think so. You know, these days you can always run something off if it's enough of an issue. Keep the patch there in case you need to change it, come back later. That's probably it. I think it's a great and unique instrument, and if it's the sort of thing you're looking for, what would be its equal? Zebra, maybe, because that has that sort of open put things together kind of environment. I would like to see some more oscillator types and forms. I have not become aware of there being an additive oscillator form. But then, as we've looked at additive before, most people hate it and won't use it, so I understand if they don't really want to put time and energy into building something that people aren't going to use. So, I made 4 different sounds to help us walk through and show off the way the device behaves. Nope, you will not get paint stripper sounds out of me. I can't even make them. A kind of Jupiter 8, JX8P, overheim matrix sort of a sound. Now it is made up of 1-2 analog, just using straight sawtooth waves. It's going through a filter. The filters, I will say, do seem a little prone to being samey. Doesn't necessarily mean they're bad, but it possibly means taking a little bit of time to get used to them and where their sweetness is. But they're not bad. I'm also going through a high pass just to clear out some of the body that in a mix I know I wouldn't want. And goes through the envelope on the end. So as you see, everything's quite visual. It says we're coming out of here and going into here. Coming out of here, going into here, coming out of here, going into here. So each of these modules is just what you're used to on a flat layout panel, but you can rearrange them. And once you get into the rearranging is when it gets interesting. They do have unisons on. My detune here is fairly mild. We can increase that or go with the unisons. You've got different modes for unison: hard, smooth, or synthetic. Let's kill off that one there and these guys. So they give you a slightly different feel. You've also then got other options. Oh, yeah, that's a nice thing. You can hover over a thing and it becomes active. So you've got some chords and what have you. But smooth, I think, is the nicest of the lot of those. Filters: low pass, band pass, high pass, notch. And then we've got actually EQs, which you use like this. So if you're looking for an EQ, they're actually in a filters box. You can get real aggressive with the slope. Which would allow for some interesting work. The resonance doesn't seem to go to self-oscillating. Is that a disappointment? I don't know. It's never really bothered me that much. I will use self-oscillating, say in Thor. I will use it for that unique craftworky creating an oscillator out of the filter, but I don't use it that often, so it's not a thing I'm going to say is a real miss. You might notice that some of these are orange. That tells me that they have a modifier. They are modulated in some way. You also notice that when I hover, some things, outputs in particular, give me this little thing. That's to allow me to say, I want to take this signal and plug it somewhere. And just about everything is pluggable in here at audio rate. So you can use almost anything to modulate almost anything at audio rate. And I keep saying that because many synths do not let you modulate at audio rate. Thor, much as I love it, does have FM, that's great. Europa, much as I love that, has no audio rate modulation. Yes, you can get the LFOs to go a bit fast, but you can't FM from one oscillator to another. This allows you to FM in various different ways to audio rate modulate, including unison oscillators, so just taking whatever's coming out of there and you can glue it to things, which is probably a paradise for paint stripper patch makers. Global stuff, we've got portamento, we've got a global unison as well, so we can double our unisons. Let's turn that off for the moment. The same options. I don't know whether it's my most favoritist unison that I've heard, but it does the job, and that's all it needs to do. Polyphony, as I said, can become a problem, but it depends what you're running and what you're doing. We can tune the whole thing, we can change our bend range, and then these are to do with this over here, which we'll get into a little bit later. Modulation. If I want to modulate my filter cutoff here, I add a device. And I click here and I can choose an envelope, an LFO, a random, which is actually a bit more clever than you think initially. I can then add note as a source, so that's where we are on the keyboard tracking, pressure, so aftertouch pressure or velocity, and then some utilities, including allowing you to modify one thing with another. So you'll see those later. If I were to want to add a third oscillator here, I would click and I would go, ooh, let's add me another analog oscillator. For the moment, it's not going anywhere. Let's drag this up into here. So now it's automatically routed itself. It's that simple. So you look at it and go, oh, but it really is rather simple. Find an empty area, find the thing you want to add it, drag it to where it needs to be in the signal flow, which you can always look at from the side. So we've got now 3 oscillators here going on to what we can call a bus. They pick up the bus as it's going by, going into the filter. If I go, yeah, I'm not sure I want that, I can turn it off. The sync might be causing me some issues. Actually, no, it's just out of tune. If I want to get rid of it, gone. Now, that's really quite simple. So envelope, to set my filter. I can just, let's go kill this off for the moment. Oh, that's got 2 of them. That's note, that's the envelope. So I can right click, I can see what I've got assigned. The envelope there, I don't want that one anymore, so I'll get rid of it. It's following keyboard. You can see there it's traveling with the keys. It's gone a little quiet. But my envelope I want that to go to the filter, so I click it. Now it shows me all the places I can jam this signal. Go to filter cutoff, drag to modulate. Might be a little excessive. If I click somewhere else, we're now out of that let's plug things together mode. Quite consistent. We've seen the same behavior in a couple of things that we've looked at. I might go, yeah, look, that just isn't enough. So I can either hover here and find the thing I'm looking for and change it. Oh, I've overdone it again. Shocking. Or I can change it there, or I can right click here and type in a number. It's really quite as simple as that. If I want to change the overall amount of modulation, if I want to change the throw of my envelope, I can just do it here. So while everything starts with a large amount of modulation, it can be cut down, including using Modifier, which we will look at later. I've got random for something. Random, that's LFO rate by the looks of it, and delay time. Ah, yes. This one, I show off one of their cool functions fairly early. Let's turn off the chorus. This delay is set that every time I press a key, it gets a randomly different time. Now I can leave that in like you normally are used to a delay. The whole signal comes out and then it goes through the effects, or I can put them into poly mode. This is an unusual thing with Phase Plant. That is, I can turn this into polyphonic, so it actually becomes part of the voice. Very, very nice. I did talk about something very similar with the final overdrive in Papin's Predator 3. And this is the same, only it's actually a lot more involved in that you can do a lot more things in here. You can put any effect inside the voice path. You can't get them into here, although you may be able to. There's more routing than meets the eye. But you can put these into the path. So now we've got, you can actually hear it there, a different length delay attached to each individual voice. So if I play 3 keys, I have 3 different delay lengths attached to each of, 3 notes. So each note has its own unique delay length. Very, very uncommon on synths. It can chew your CPU a little aggressively, especially if you do it with heavy-handed effects. So we'll turn that off. That's normal delay. And that's with it in polyphonic, so it becomes more embiggened because we've got more variety. It's sort of equivalent of using a diffusion on a delay. We've also got, I've added this chorus. This one's just in standard chorus mode. And an EQ. That's our patch. Really capable. That's a pretty simple patch. And for some people you may feel like, oh, but I don't want to have to go through that work to get a simple patch. Fair enough, I get you. You can always save off if there aren't already some in there. There are tutorial patches, which I, of course, didn't even open. But you could save off some pretty basic architecture to oscillator, 1 filter, analog. There's nothing to stop you from doing that, and then you can open those patches as a starting point for whatever you want to do, and then if you're partway through it and go, I could use me some grain FM, you can just throw it in. That's a nice thing. Next, let's fold that one up, make sure I've assigned this one, open it up. This one is sample-based. So a big modern digital synth pad. The samples are my own. Let's turn off one of them. They give you samples, which I of course just bypassed. And because I want to know, will it pull mine in and how's it going to handle them? Because I know these sounds, I've been working with them. There's a refill that's just put up for reason to approve, built on these sounds. So I know them, and I've noticed that as I put them into different samplers, they behave differently and sometimes sound very different. So yes, it'll pull in my sounds if I want, or I could pull in theirs, which, it's not to say the samples are bad, I have no idea because I didn't even look at them. But look, we can tune, but we can also retune using the harmonic system, which, if you know a DX7 and that form of FM synthesis, is a different way of changing pitch. You can also frequency shift. This is really unusual. I don't know of another VST that has frequency shifting built into the oscillator. Pitch shift we all understand. Press a key, press an octave above, the pitch has doubled. This is a way of saying, let's just move every individual frequency by X. It is first known as a bowed frequency modulator or ring modulator, and was a Moog thing. But that's a good way to get some rather interesting out-of-tuney sorts of things. I use, matter of fact, I showed it in the Purity video. I often use frequency shifting as a very nice way of moving static samples. So people give me these drum kits, which are like Easy Robot Drummer, and I can use frequency shifting to move them around. So it's a different way of moving pitch. You can also play around with phase shifting. We can offset the start point. We've got our loop points. We can lock things in. We can change our route. So we can tune our sample as we go. Sometimes we get samples that are out of tune, or sometimes we just want to make them more interesting by moving them somewhere completely different. We can unison them too. With some samples that'll just sound horrid, with some it will sound rather cool. You can crossfade, so you don't have to have perfectly looped samples if you're bringing in things from the outside world. And of course you can bring in anything. You can bring samples of you discussing your love life with your mistress and use them in your next song. May not be the wisest thing to do, but you can do it. Second sample. Filter. Filter's got an LFO. Not tied to the voice triggering, just moves up and down. It is going through a distortion. The distortion is after the filter. I could put it before. And it would sound like that. Nice and polite. After. There we go. That adds a little bit of, because I know people like things that are, then that adds a little bit of that. I probably would either put it before the filter or just not use it at all myself. And then people say, that's too clean, Derek, you can't do that. It's like, yeah, go make your own music, don't get judgy. Envelopes. Envelopes, you can change the shape of the attacks. Decay, you can as well. Let's move that so you can put your decay. You can make it scoop one way, but oddly enough, you can't make a scoop the other way. You can't make it, ooh. I find that odd in this situation because there are times where I want a really short decay with a curve like this rather than a like that. That's great for making certain types of drums, but this is great for making certain other types of drums. So if you're watching planties, or hearties, then yeah, make that so it'll go the other way. We know you can do it because that one goes both ways. Boing, boing, boing. Why can this one not go boing, boing, boing? Same with that one. Just because you didn't think you'd want it, why can't we have it? So Phase Plantians, if that turns up in the next release. We're using our glide here. You might prefer it without. Effects. Let's turn off. Chorus. It's not a world-beating chorus, but it's a basic chorus and it does its job. Got the stereo thing that many of you'll love. Just be careful. Listen to your mix in mono as well. Make sure you don't lose anything. And the delay, which is modulated. It does take modulation quite well, but only in milliseconds mode. If you try to modulate it in a synced mode, it just lurches from one synced timing to another. Very common. The echo in Reason does the same. Personally, I'd prefer if there was another knob, so you can say, okay, well, set my BPM time, and then, so you can have the best of both worlds, which the echo does allow you to do, but that's on board. It's just if you give it off board, then it will bloom, bloom, as it switches from one setting to another. Smallish thing, but I use so many of my own delays that it wouldn't bother me anyway. Next sound, fold that one up. This one we will press play for. I'm using an external sequencer to do that. There's no doubt some way to do it in here. Didn't look at it. Might as well go with the tools I know. It doesn't matter to anyone how the notes got there, they did. So a very EBM, electronic body music, industrial kind of early bass line. This is using the Wavetable oscillator. So a Wavetable oscillator is a kind of a sample, but it's a sample that progresses over time. This is one of theirs. I could have tried bringing in my own, but let's be fair and use some of their stuff. So you've got standard stuff and all kinds of other things. I know paint stripper people love these things because they can get complex and move them around and modulate them up against other things and what have you, and that's, yeah, really horrible sounding. But as I said before, let's pop this back in play. We should be able to trial those. Why am I... Oh, because I turned my out off. So that is using an LFO that's not synced to anything to just walk us through the frame, which slice of that wavetable that we're going to play today. And that works nicely. Again, we can unison it. We are so obsessed. But I'm not. Something else. I've used one of their distortions. We've got different modes. Not unusual as such. You can mix them as well, but I'm not really a fan of mixing drives. I'm an all or nothing kind of a guy. But it complexifies that wave. And well, for hard edge distortion, seems to do a nice job. You would need, if you were me, to find ways to warm that up, which is what your filters and EQs and what have you are going to do. Fairly aggressive shape. Envelope. This is where it would be nice to be able to take that shape and turn it the other way around. So we can have a really short decay, but it could still be solid at the same time. Kind of the equivalent of a hold. But a hold is I want it to curve. But that's all right. Now this one then gets a little bit complex and a little bit interesting. I've got the sound going into dynamics. I happen to own the dynamics VST, Snapin, what have you. I rather like this little doohickey. Did a review on it myself as well when I first got it. It's a compressor that you can use to work at the top and at the bottom. So at the top it works the way you're used to. Once you go above the threshold, you can set your ratio of how aggressive you want to be. You can also set it that when it falls below the threshold, that it's either going to start to close the sound down faster, which is good if you're working with podcasters who speak in empty, echoey rooms. It's not going to do the same job as RX9 or whatever, but I don't like that. Let's do the spectral strip, because it just sounds like you put the person through a cheese grater. No matter how clever you think, they still sound like they went through a cheese grater. Yes, you'll tell me I'm using it wrong, but cheese grater. The other way is that it actually holds the level up. And so I have seen people showing how this can achieve the OTT effect. And as I just recently said to somebody, I'm not down with OTT. Yeah, you know me. But Dynamics is a rather cool little device. You might be confused when you first meet it, if you purchase it, but it's a good one. I like it. So I'm using it here to, as the sound backs off, to staccatoize it a little bit, and of course to push it on the top end. Then you'll notice that there is a delay going on. This is quite complex. Now, I had the delay in the normal channel. But the problem is that delay, that echo is too bright. I don't want it that way. It took me a little bit to think my way through it, and I'm thinking there doesn't seem to be a way to send. And then I realized there was, because you have an auxiliary. So I added an auxiliary. I then went back and put it into groups. So you'll see I've got one group here, which is the synth itself. Let's minimalize him. And then I've got another group here. So I've added this auxiliary, flown in 100% of the output of the synth. So this output here, you can see, is sending itself, flashy, 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 over here. Cool. So that means that I've now tapped that signal and got it somewhere else. So it's behaving now like an oscillator in terms of the way you saw the oscillator move to the other thing. That goes to a filter, which is rolling off the top end, rolling off the bottom end, hear how that sounds nicer? And of course I had the modulation here, working on the panning and also on the pitch wobble. So we've got a multiplier, which is new. You haven't shown you this one before. This one takes one input and second input and makes them work together. So that is a modifier, just as if I would want to use to assign a vibrato, but I want it to be controlled by my mod wheel. I would set up my vibrato LFO going into input A, and then my mod wheel going into input B, and then I can control, with very simple maths, how one modifies the other. No sidechaining, kiddies, just modifying. And because of the way they've done it, it might seem a slightly unusual or cumbersome step, but For somebody who wants a more modular, I can do anything with anything kind of approach, this means you can plug any two things together. You could even put several of these things in a row and fly in a post-filter oscillator sound, which could be a sample that's FM'd by a wavetable. And this gets interesting. Ugly, but interesting. So this allowed me to make a more complex sound within the box. Normally with a synth, this gets difficult unless they've given you the tone controls on here. And I'm looking at this delay going, why haven't they given us tone controls? That's a real problem with this. But they have, and that is that I could set up going to an auxiliary, and then I could do whatever I wanted to this, which means that I could fly in one of these, so another oscillator, and let's see what happens. Level. Yeah, why not? Let's see what happens. Is it a great result? Not for this sound, but it's cool that we can do it. So, very cool. Let's minimize that one. And my last sound here, this is looking at FM head-on. Let's start with our basic sound. Ooh, delightful, a sine wave. My second favorite oscillator. FM. This is not going to the output. See how these are just sitting here, minding their business, doing nothing, like lazy oscillators, but they're actually sent to, in this case, the phase. We could send them to the straight pitch, which gives us one kind of FM sort of feel. We can send them to the shift, which just try it. Or we can send it to phase, which is Yamaha style FM. Or Casio CZ. So that is complexifying the wave. We are adding one wave to another to complexify it. Nice little simple DX style brass going through chorus and delay, which I don't think that delay has any modulation on it at all because we're thinking digital. I have put a filter in here because it can sound just a little hard. I'm not hearing it in these, but on my speakers it felt like it was a little hard, so I put in the filter just to calm it. Now that is going to our main oscillator. But with FM, it's normally several things acting on each other. So in this case, I've added a second oscillator or operator, to use the FME sort of term, because this is operating on somebody else. It's exerting pressure on somebody else. This one is going to oscillator 2. And here and C, we're getting a little tongue, mouth movement noise, which gives us a more intriguing sound as we hear that. Is that a good or bad sound? Who knows? Haven't got a purpose for it. It's not on a record. We could now add a second sound. Actually, before I do that, I'll show you that to get vibrato to behave nicely, you're going to want to send it to all of the oscillators at the same time. Because if we have them working separately from each other, like one of the oscillators stays still and the other one moves, we're changing the relationship between them and they will sound nasty. Unless, of course, you're looking for paint stripper sound, then go for it. But if you want them to stay attractive, then you want all of your oscillators to move to keep their relationship with each other, because FM's all about relationship. So in this case, I've got my LFOing away. See, I've reduced its range. I'm sending that to multiply input 1, so that's it there. And then I've got an input B, which happens to be envelope 2. And that is handling the duty of making that LFO not appear to come in until a little bit later. But I'm tricky. I know that brass sounds great when you've got a little bit of LFO or a little bit of pitch movement just at the beginning of it. So rather than creating a new envelope, I'll use the one that I've got and use it upside down, meaning that when the sound starts, we've got, I think you've got to think of this envelope as being upside down, we've got LFO, LFO disappears, LFO comes back, which gives you some of that fruity blah, 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 blah at the beginning of a brass sound, which is the person actually beginning to play the note blah, blah, blah. And then I've sent all 3 of those using the type command, using the let's type the number 5 into here command to make sure they are all the same. So the relationship stays there, and we can embiggen that. Oh, the neighbour with his motorbike. He's got nice bikes, Aprilias, Ducatis, all that kind of stuff. So your multipliers are really quite useful once you get your head around the very basic maths of applying one thing to another. If I want to... Oh, I've also got velocity assigned to the level. So we control how one of these affects the other. So you'll see that when it's off, level is 0. We're using the envelope to actually control the level of this operator. That's exactly how it's done in DX World. We can unison. But it gets us out of DX World. So we've got the second one here. Let's add a third one. We'll go with analog. We will go with sine because other things get a little complex. But rather than operating on one of these, let's have a second that's operating on the first. Let's go pretty heavy-handed. We can always reduce it. See, so that sets our tone as to what's happening. What happens if we sync that? I kind of like that, I gotta say. So let's turn its volume down, or just a little tiny bit, and go with, what will we go with? This one, I guess, and attach this to the level. Let's adjust our harmonic. Starting to feel a little bit Keith Emerson here. That's a good thing. Envelopes timings are a little funny, but you get used to them. They are weighted more for fast speeds. Personally, I use fast speeds, and so I'm pleased they're there, but I tend to want to get into the slow speeds, and they've got a small amount on the end of the throw of the knob for the slow speeds, and most of it's assigned to fast speeds. I'd prefer a more even weighting, or, and I have no problems with this, changing the weighting of the knob. So we can have a button which allows us to be fast focused, or a button that we press that changes it to be slow focused. That's the kind of thing that I like, because then I can pick and choose, do I want this envelope knob to be fast or do I want it to be slow? An unusual thing to see on synths. I've done it with a few of my own. I can understand why they might go, oh, that's not necessary, but I would like to see that sort of thing because it fits well with their we'll let you do things that other people don't let you do kind of philosophy, and it expands these envelopes to being more interesting. Or the other thing that I have not noticed, which strikes me as a little odd, and maybe I haven't been looking, is I'm not seeing an MSEG. And it seems to me rather odd that a device like this wouldn't have a multi-segment envelope, so one that you can, make do all kinds of things over a period of time. A bit of a head scratcher, that one, for a synth like this. And it might actually be a liability and a reason why people don't pick it up, because you'd expect to see like 47 MSEGs in something like this. That's sounding quite nice. Different. Let's actually take this here, that's the short envelope, and apply it to our kind of cool. Well, I'm getting a bit bored with the more aggressive sound. And this is where the instruments really starts to come alive. I think that it's possibly not the best analog synth that I've heard, but there are probably ways to make that come out a little bit more. But in terms of once you get into the digital side of things, which I think is designed far more for, things like the FM is really rather nice, then we can start to get layers of detail which are cool. So as a synth that you can pick and do a bit of this, a bit of that, and I could say, okay, well, yeah, that's all very well, but now I need a wavetable in the middle of this. Where is it? Not there. Up here. Let's see what else we've got. Acoustic. Oh, brass. And let's assign this envelope to do what needs to be done. Not doing it for me. That one actually is. That's a thing that really appeals to me in an instrument, that you haven't got something that's like, we're just to this or we're just to that. We can do bits of everything. And I know that's very much the thing in the Uber synths at the moment, but the rawness, the to the boneness that you can do in Phase Plant in terms of architecture might put some people off, but it's, as I keep saying, a little outside of what you can do with your average synth that's in this arena, and that makes it really pretty special. So again, a couple of good thumbs up from me for an instrument that that really has a unique place. There are a couple of things would be nice to see, like some changes to the envelopes or just some MSEGs, because that would solve my timing problem as well, because a good MSEG, you can just change the overall time of the whole envelope. And plus, of course, if you've got the ability to wobble the sections, then I'm sure I could wobble one of my decay sections the way that it won't let me go at the moment. So little tiny things like that, some more oscillator forms, especially if we could get into some really interesting oscillator forms, unusual oscillator forms that nobody else is giving us. Preferably not stuck with just drones. Something that's still underdone is the whole physical modeling thing, the Karplus strong type thing. I think that could sit very, very nicely in here. They're the kinds of developments that I would like to see that add even more textural variety to what can be done in a synth that really can be a synthesist's paradise. If you have any questions, ask them on down below, preferably after pressing that subscribe me button. Subscribe yourself, not me, because I'm... and yeah, generally, have a good day. Be excellent to each other.